Saber y conocer. Saber y conocer is one of those cases where the two verbs happen to mean the same thing when said in English. You learned this before with the concept of ser and estar. Ser and estar, as you know, both mean the verb to be in English, which can cause some issues because if English just has one way of saying something and Spanish has two distinct verbs that are used in two different ways, the English speaker has to make the extra effort of really understanding when to use ser and when to use estar. We're going to do the same thing with saber and conocer. Saber and conocer both mean to know. Let's start by going over the different forms of the verbs saber and conocer. This is for present tense, and I want to point out that in the present tense, these two fall under the category of irregular jo verbs. Those are the verbs that, yes, they follow their normal patterns, like in this case, the ER, but the jo forms of them don't follow that pattern. They have their own forms that are irregular to that. That being said, you have to make the extra effort to remember sé for saber and conozco for conocer. Now, they both mean to know. So, yo sé is I know, and yo conozco is I know. Tú sabes is you know, and tú conoces is also you know. So, picking between the two is going to be very tricky because English does not use two verbs for the verb to know. So, there are going to be times you use saber, and there are going to be times you use conocer. What I'd like for you to do, I'm going to say all of them, and you saying them with me, at the risk, of course, of sounding like a crazy person alone listening to this video, just to make sure you practice pronunciation. Sé, sabes, sabe, sabemos, saben. Conozco, conoces, conoce, conocemos, conocen. If you are a native Spanish speaker or you've got some knowledge already of Spanish before entering this course, you may make the mistake of putting an S instead of a Z there. Please be careful with that. Those are the kinds of things you learn once you formally study Spanish. The first stop is saber. Saber is usually when you know about something. So the key idea here is about, or knowing information, if you will. So if it falls under information, you're going to use saber. So for example, yo sé el nombre de esa maestra. I'm saying I know the name of that teacher. Now, by saying this, what am I saying that I know about her? I'm saying that I know her name. Having known that information makes me want to use saber. Another time that you use saber is when you say that you know that. This is the same as saying information, but I really want to make a point that when you see the word that, that's going to signal, again, information. And that's a red flag for saber. So, for example, ella sabe que la maestra se llama señorita D'Andrea. Now, que is the word that means that in this sentence. So if you see que like that without the accent, then you know we're going to use saber before it. Ella sabe que la maestra se llama señorita D'Andrea. She knows that the teacher's name is Miss D'Andrea. You would also use saber to say that you know how to do something. So not just knowing information, but some kind of a skill would fall under saber as well. So if I say nosotros no sabemos esquiar, we don't know how to ski. Notice we just did saber plus infinitive. If you ever have the verb saber and you follow it with an infinitive, you're saying that you know or you don't know, if you add the word know in front of it, that you know or you don't know how to do that thing that you have in the infinitive form. So in this case, no sabemos esquiar. We don't know how to ski. Now let's talk about conocer. Conocer can get a little bit tricky because it doesn't fully match up well to English. So understanding that some things are not going to match up to English perfectly is very key in learning a second language. Conocer would be more for to knowing somebody personally. So knowing somebody personally or knowing something or someone directly. So for example, if I say yo conozco la maestra, I'm saying I know the teacher. Here, I said that I know the name of the teacher. This is information. This is just knowing her directly. If you know the person directly, you're going to use conocer. If you know things about her, you're going to use saber. So knowing her name would be saber. And just saying you know her directly without saying that you know anything about her is going to be conocer. Now, I put here that if it is a person that you know, you're going to add the word a in front of it. This is one of those little tricky grammar things that is not easily explained. We call that personal a. So if after conocer, what you have is a person, you must add personal a there. Okay, that's a little side tip. Now, here's the second example that might be a little confusing. Nosotros conocemos Ecuador. Now, this is we know Ecuador. In Spanish, if you say this sentence, you're implying that you've been there. So knowing a place directly can also be used with conocer, but it really means that you've been there. Yes, if you've been there, then obviously you know things about it. But in this sentence, we're not saying what we know about Ecuador, so we're not using saber. Instead, we're using conocer because really, truly, we're talking about knowing Ecuador directly. Or knowing of Ecuador would be another way to put it. And the last point in which we would use conocer instead of saber is to say that we're acquainted or if we're meeting a person. So conocer can also mean to meet. In fact, sometimes it's the better translation over to know. So in the case of the example that you see here, ustedes van a conocer a los estudiantes. You guys, or you plural, are going to know the students. That doesn't sound so great in English, but if you replace it with to meet, then you get the same exact meaning that Spanish is portraying, that you're acquainted with or meeting this person. So in this case, you also have to make sure you use what I'm calling personal a, because personal a, anytime you've got conocer and you're going to follow it with a person or group of people, like los estudiantes, you have to have a there. So in essence, the best trick to remember when to use saber versus conocer is that saber are usually instances that can be learned. You can learn how to do something. You can learn the information that might be followed by the word that. And you can learn about something. So that is really more where saber comes from. Conocer, meeting someone, that's not really something you can learn. That's not information, essentially. And knowing someone personally, yeah, you can meet them, but learning them just doesn't make sense. So saber is kind of more associated with things that you can learn, whereas conocer is more associated with things that you can meet personally. So that's the distinction between the two. Hopefully that's a helpful way to look at it. Some key words to keep in mind are que. Anytime you see que, that's going to be a signal for saber. If you see a, that might be a signal for conocer. If you see the translation of the word about, which is sobre, another way is acerca de. Those are two ways of saying about something. If you see those, you're talking information if we're in the context of saber and conocer. And last, if what you're seeing is something like a blank and then the name of a person or a place, we're probably talking conocer because if you think about it, knowing something directly, that's pretty direct. We're saying we know this person or we know or we've been to this place, we're acquainted with this place. In that case, it's going to be saber. If you've got these extra words like sobre and acerca de and que, then we're about to add information and make it a little more complex. Tu turno. Now it's your turn to give these a try. So when you tackle these numbers 1 through 6, the best thing to do is to first figure out whether it's saber or conocer that the sentence needs. Make sure you can justify it to yourself by giving a reason as to why you picked saber versus conocer. And then find the subject of the sentence so that you conjugate saber and conocer correctly with the forms that I gave you in the beginning of this lesson. Buena suerte!